And I'm delighted now to be joined by Fadi Farhat, the legal consultant specialising in human rights and immigration. Thanks so much for coming in. This act is a very difficult act. The Unionists don't like it because it potentially gives an amnesty to terrorists. The Republicans don't like it because it potentially gives an amnesty to soldiers. But with a peace process, ultimately political decisions have to be made, which are difficult for everybody. And it seems to me to think that this can be judged as a matter of human rights is a fundamental mistake.
Thank you, Jacob. The human rights element comes in because we're dealing with historic deaths, estimated to be about 3,600 deaths in the midst of the troubles that occurred in Northern Ireland historically. The human rights dimension relates effectively to Article 2 of the ECHR, which provides the right to life. And of course, where life has been taken, the principle that the state should conduct an effective investigation into what happened, to give closure to victims, to learn lessons, to find out what went wrong so that we can avoid it in the future. That principle in itself, underpinned usually by having an inquest, is something that we all would agree with in any event. So notwithstanding it's enshrined in the ECHR, it's still something that is part and parcel of what we expect from government, which is to investigate when things go wrong. And that's really the starting point here. So in substance, I don't think many will disagree that when we have atrocities from either side, that we would expect some mechanism from which to seek redress and learn lessons from.
And it's worth bearing in mind they're overwhelmingly from the terrorist side, that there are some from British forces, but they are a very small percentage of the total.
That's correct, yes.
But your point on inquests is a fair one, but the Act provides that you only get this amnesty if you're willing to cooperate with an investigatory body to try and find out what actually happened, which is, of course, what the families have been asking for, that they should know. And that, again, is why it seems odd that this is fundamentally political. There are difficult circumstances where there have been terrible troubles, where states have to take extraordinary action. And for a foreign government to try and take this to court seems to me extraordinarily ill-advised of the Irish government.
Yeah, I would agree. Personally, notwithstanding the framework that exists and that I support that framework, I think that the challenge is somewhat misguided. And I actually think that the Act in general, and this is my personal opinion, is compatible. And I think it's compatible for two reasons. The Irish Republic's position is that the Strasbourg court has said that, in theory, as a default position, almost as a starting point, although I hesitate to use that term, starting point, but the default position is that immunity from prosecution is an amnesty. I mean, this Act doesn't use the word amnesty, but in effect it is an amnesty. And the Strasbourg court has held that amnesties in general are incompatible. However, the Strasbourg court itself has opened the door to say that in certain circumstances, amnesties could be justified if they promote the aim of reconciliation, community cohesion. And it is that point that the UK government is seeking to say that the nature of this legislation has a special character to it. And in 1991, the Strasbourg court itself, in a case against France, held that the amnesty operated there by France upon independence in New Caledonia had a special character because the aim was to foster reconciliation and community cohesion and to draw a line under the sand. And I would say that on the facts of this case, the UK government has probably struck that balance by creating this new commission. And this commission, and as you pointed out, the amnesty applies to both sides. And of the 3,600 deaths, about 2,000 are estimated or attributed to deaths caused by Republican paramilitaries. So that's more than half. And in that sense, it's about drawing the line under the sand. And the UK government's case is that the troubles and what happened in Northern Ireland has a sort of special character to it that can justify a departure from the usual principle, as was held by the Strasbourg court in 1991 in the case involving France.
And that's very interesting. One of the things that's fascinating about this act is it is opposed by both the Unionists and by the Republicans, but that both of them have something from it that they like as well. So the Unionists want to see the prosecution of soldiers stopped, and the Republicans want to see the prosecution of their supporters stopped. And so I'm just worried that the Irish government is coming in rather heavy-handedly into a very sensitive situation where people who formally oppose it have found that they can live with it, who are the main participants in the peace process. It's just a very odd thing for the Irish government to do.
It is very odd. And as you said, the Act gives both sides something. And it's that characteristic of the legislation that perhaps makes it special in character and fosters the aim of reconciliation. Because usually the default position of amnesties being incompatible with the ECHR is based on amnesties usually providing immunity for state actors. Here it's for both sides. And not only that, there's been precedent for it even in the Northern Ireland context. I think in 1998 there was legislation which provided for the early release of prisoners.
Yeah,
now that's amnesty-like. It's not quite an amnesty because, of course, to be a prisoner, you would have had to be convicted.
The process, yes.
And then in 1999, there was an actual amnesty for paramilitary kidnappers. Nobody complained.
About that.
Not a single complaint then.
Yes.
So this new legislation could be seen. I mean, taking in isolation, it perhaps is not that pleasant, but it could be seen as a continuum of those earlier processes where nobody batted an eyelid.
Well, thank you so much for a really excellent explanation of what is happening. We may disagree on the ECHR, but I think what you've explained today has been extremely helpful. I'm very grateful. Thank you.